Hello everyone and welcome back to another Mother. This is a parenting and faith podcast by My Spring Harvest with me, Emma Borquay. I am a mum of two little ones. I've got Ezra who is 4 and Hallie who is 1. And I guess like many of us have experienced, life can be unpredictable at times. It's full of ups and downs and curveballs, especially when you've got kids. So like anything, I guess, it's better when you do it together. So in season 1 of Another Mother, I spoke to 9 incredible people to hear about their parenting experiences, to learn from them, to share in their wisdom. So now we are back for season 2, and I get to speak to more amazing people to seek answers to my never-ending questions and to explore some really interesting topics. So I'm excited today that we are on tour. If you're watching this podcast, which some of you just listen, some of you watch, but if you're watching, you'll notice that we're in different surroundings today to our usual, and that is because we've got an incredible episode today with the wonderful Zoe Clark-Coates MBE. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you.
It is so good to have you today. So just a little introduction to Zoe, although she doesn't need much introductions. The best-selling author of 5 books. She is also the founder and CEO of the Mariposa Trust, which is leading the way in providing support for anyone who is experiencing baby loss or has experienced baby loss and bereavement. She is also an award-winning campaigner, and she was awarded an MBE for her services to baby loss in the Queen's Birthday Honours list, wasn't it, in 2021. So as you may have guessed by this introduction, this is a very important conversation, but it is a sensitive one. So we do encourage you to listen at your own discretion. So Zoe, this is wonderful to have you on the podcast. I've wanted to have you on for a while, so I'm so glad that we can have this conversation today. And through the work that you've been doing over the last 10 years now, is it 10 years?
I think coming up to 11 now, which is, it feels like yesterday, but also feels like the only thing I've ever done. So
I can imagine you've supported so many families through what can be such a difficult time. And the work you've done is actually incredible, not just directly with families, but in your campaigning and advocacy work as well, and the work you've done in policy and all of that stuff. So could you just tell us a bit to begin why this is an issue that is so close to your heart?
Yeah, well, going back many years, I trained as a counsellor. I was already a grief specialist before going through loss myself. Okay. So my mum's a therapist, so it felt a really natural thing for me to train in. So that's going back 20 odd years. And I loved that training and I used it every day. But I came out of using it in a kind of therapy, counselling way and using it more in business. So me and my partner, Andy, we went on to set up a very successful events and PR company. That was a global organisation. And our clients were people like Coca-Cola, Bupa, Government. And we were loving life. We absolutely love what we did. We're all about exciting events and traveling the world and all of these good things, and kind of delayed having children a bit because we got married super young and thought we've got time. And so we delayed having children, we're running the business, and then one day that internal clock definitely started ticking. And I thought that was kind of a myth. I didn't think it was an actual thing. But as soon as your head decides, I want a baby now, it feels like something that needs to instantly happen. And I was so naive looking back because I just thought everything would be easy. I didn't think we'd go through problems at all. My sister had had children with no problems at all. Now, I was a twin and my twin was lost at birth. Oh, wow. Well, in pregnancy, not at birth.
Yeah.
And because of that, I guess I was aware of loss from a younger age, but you still don't think it will be something you go through. The fact that I wasn't raised with my twin was obviously something I was acutely aware of. But yeah, I still didn't think it would happen to me. And then one of my closest friends went through baby loss. They had 2 stillbirths and some miscarriages. And I really closely journeyed that with them and was able to use my professional skills as well for that, very much to help them through. And that was what alerted me probably even more to loss, because I kind of journeyed that with them through that experience. still was naive to thinking it would happen to me. So we decided to try for children. We were really blessed that it happened relatively quickly, and then we lost that baby. But we didn't actually tell anybody. We hadn't told anyone we were trying, and because we'd waited a while to have children, you kind of get asked those questions regularly when you first get married. Are you going to have children? I mean, we got given baby toys at our wedding as a wedding present because people knew we loved kids and just presumed we'd have children really quickly.
Wow, that's an interesting gift
like
choice.
Weird wedding present. But yeah, it kind of stops happening after you don't have children for 2 or 3 years into marriage. People stop asking and thinking, oh, maybe there's a problem, or maybe, I don't know. They stopped asking. And so by the time we decided to try, people weren't asking us all the time. And so it felt kind of, how do you tell somebody you've gone through loss if you hadn't told them you were pregnant? And it also felt like a weirdly private and intimate thing to share, because as soon as we would share that we'd lost, people would know we were on that journey trying to have children. And it felt like something really private for us. So we decided not to tell anybody. Then quite quickly got pregnant again. And that pregnancy felt really, really different. And I guess because it felt so different, it felt much safer, and we were secure that everything was okay. We were going for regular scans and everything was great. And then on one weekend, a Friday evening, I started to bleed and was able to get a private scan. And thankfully, we were reassured that there was nothing wrong. We saw our daughter dancing away on the scan, the ultrasound, and she was fine. And that was great and reassuring. But then over the next few days, the bleeding increased. And I remember on this one day, just having an overriding sense that she'd died. And I remember just screaming on the bathroom floor, God save this child. And it was very, very traumatic. We ended up at A&E, who were really bad in their care, and asked us why we were so upset, and said, is it because she's an IVF baby and you've paid for her? And that was our first experience of complete insensitivity around this subject. I remember leaving. They weren't able to give us a scan. They told us we'd have to wait. There was no appointments, but because we'd had a scan so recently, they just presumed the bleeding was totally irrelevant and that she was absolutely fine. And we'd just pop back in a week and we'll be able to reassure you then, which I was absolutely not going to do. I'm the world's most impatient person. And there was no way I was going to be able to just sit and wait for confirmation that she was fine. So we left some messages on some clinics' answer machines. And then on a Monday morning, we got a call to say, we can scan you now if you come straight over. So we jumped in the car, headed across town and went to this clinic. And it was there that the scan started, and it was a really modern clinic. So the projection of it was massive on the opposite wall. And as soon as the scan started, we could see our daughter on the screen, and it was such a relief. But the midwife who was doing the scanning was really quiet, and we quickly sensed the energy in the room just completely changed. And eventually she just said, Zoe, I'm really, really sorry, but her heart stopped beating. And it was the worst feeling. And I just remember screaming and crying, and we were taken into another room, and a consultant came in who'd been actually watching the scan from his office. And I was like, I just don't believe it. I need another scan. So we were taken back in, and he confirmed that she died. And the bottom really well and truly fell from our world. And I didn't know how I'd recover. I didn't know how I could even go home. I was just like, how could I walk back into our front door that we'd walked out, presuming everything was fine and just needing reassurance, but yet our whole world is forever changed. We had to phone the family from the clinic and tell them what had happened. My parents jumped in the car from Devon, and they were just hysterical crying, and it was really traumatic. And that's the only bit that ever makes me now, because I share my story all the time, makes me just feel a bit overwhelmingly sad, is thinking of my parents, Because I remember my dad walking into our house and just sobbing. And I'd only ever seen him cry a few times in my life. And I felt like, I've done this to them.
Yeah.
Because we chose to have children. And they're now experiencing this heartbreak because of our journey. And it just felt so painful. And I decided to deliver naturally. So we had to wait to go into labour. And it took a week to the day of her death being confirmed, basically. I went into labour and delivered her.
Wow.
And we named her Darcy. And yeah, it was a really dark time, felt really devoid of hope. But I did feel unbelievably close to God. And everyone would say to me, how can you be? Because one thing I haven't said is when I found out I was pregnant, I was in bed one evening and I felt the nudge of the Holy Spirit say, go do a pregnancy test because you're pregnant. And I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm pregnant. Started this whole conversation and I just felt, you are pregnant, go do a test. And I did a test and I was pregnant. And so because of that, people who knew that were like, how can you worship a God who would tell you you were pregnant, but then kind of took your baby away? And I was like, I didn't see it like that. For me, it felt like an unbelievable gift that I'd been alerted to being, that I was expecting. So I had longer with my daughter than I would have had. And I felt like he knew I needed that. And that was a gift. And I'd never for one moment felt like God had removed my babies, ever. It never even crossed my mind that I just was so acutely aware that loss and death and illness all happens because of the fall. This isn't God's plan. This isn't his will for my life. It was a devastation that he journeyed with us. And what I got so much comfort from is I remember just having these really intimate times of worship and feeling the presence of God so acutely and him saying, I get it. The worst loss in the world is the loss of a child, which is why I gave my son.
Wow.
And so I get it. I grieve for my child too. And so it was a beautiful experience with God, however harrowing it was.
Wow, that's like such an incredible perspective to have in that moment. And I think a perspective like that does only really, I think, come through the Holy Spirit. And you can't manufacture that. You can't force yourself to believe that. No. That really comes from like a deep place within in your relationship with God.
And it was such a beautiful encounter. I remember at one moment I was in the car and the song came on, Tim Hughes' song, When the Tears Fall. And I felt like I'd had almost an out-of-body experience, like a real heavenly encounter. And in that moment, I remember feeling I wouldn't change what I've gone through at all because of just those moments of connection that was so different. And I've never experienced it again. It was only in that moment. And I remember thinking I wouldn't take back anything I've been through because that gave me an access to the heavens, to God, that I'd never ever encountered before. And an hour later, I was like, I wish this wasn't happening. It's absolutely awful. But in that moment, I remember feeling I wouldn't exchange what I've been through because that moment was so unbelievably precious. And so we journeyed through that loss and then got pregnant again. And tragically, that ended in miscarriage. And that's how we lost our 3 children. And it was after that I thought, I cannot have any more children. This feels like torture. It almost feels like self-harm. You're desperate to have children, but you're acutely aware that what you're experiencing is actually destroying you. And so me and Andy spoke, and we're soulmates, best friends, and he was just like, whatever you want. If you don't want to try again, then we 100% we won't be trying again. And I know I would have changed my mind because that's how grief works. It feels like there's no way you can face it. But actually the desire to raise a living child was so strong. I would have done it over and over again. But for that period of time, I kind of needed to know that was off the cards and we weren't going to try. And then I found out I was pregnant and I couldn't believe it. It felt almost miraculous, like a decision was taken out of our hands. And that's what I needed. I needed it to not be a choice. I needed to just find out I was pregnant. And that's what happened. And that's the first child we got to bring home from the hospital, our little girl, Esme. And we only planned to have one child. That was always the plan, our lifestyle and everything. We thought maybe one child would be great. Lots of our friends only had one child. And as soon as I came out of the theatre with her, I had a C-section. I was like, I wish there was two of them. And everyone was like, hang on, I thought you were only having one. And oh my goodness, we just adored being parents. And really quickly, I guess when she was probably approaching one, I was like, maybe we should have another. Maybe this isn't something we should just stop at one. Maybe we should have more. And a while later, we decided to try. And really naively thought our dealings with loss were behind us. We just didn't think we would go through loss again. Whatever was wrong, we presumed was fixed. And we were going for regular scans on this next pregnancy. And Esme was actually with us. We were having a consultation with a friend of ours. And he was scanning away and we could see our little boy Samuel on the screen. And then he just went silent and he said, I don't even know how to tell you, but his heart stopped beating. And we were back to that dark room with a trap door underneath. But Esme was sitting there going, what's happening? What's going on? And I said, oh, could I just leave the room? And I remember walking out of this room and going into the bathroom and just screaming and sliding down the wall and going, God, not again, not again. And that time we decided to deliver him in surgery. So I went into surgery about 6 days later to deliver him. And yeah, it was harrowing and really traumatic. And it was different because we weren't grieving the fact that we would never raise a child. We'd got Esme now. But the grief was just as horrendous and just as all-consuming. But it had another layer to it as well. We were grieving her sibling and we were grieving what she might never now have and just a whole host of things. And I remember multiple moments where I remember this one acutely where I was sitting in the bedroom and Andy was playing with Esme in another room and my sister was sitting in the bedroom with me and she went, what can I do to help? And I was like, I'm drowning. And I just felt like I was screaming on the inside and I just didn't know how to communicate it and she didn't know how to rescue me from it and it just felt so horrible and it felt really isolating and really lonely and you kind of having to come in and out of the grieving process when you're trying to raise a child as well because you're wanting the world to stay really normal for them and so it's just so hard. You don't have this luxury which we'd had previously just to take yourself to bed and hide and think, oh, I'll come out when I'm ready because they want to still go and play and colour with you and do stuff. So it's just a very different experience grieving while you've got a child in your home. So we didn't know what to do after that, but we then made the decision to try again. And we waited to tell the whole family and we decided to tell them on Christmas Eve that we were expecting again. And we always have a Christmas Eve party and we told everyone at that we were expecting. And no joke, 30 minutes later, I started to bleed. Oh my God. And I was just like, I can't believe this. And it was quickly confirmed I'd gone through loss again. And our objection that Christmas was to allow ourselves to grieve, but to focus on Esme, to give her a magical Christmas still. But then come January, I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. ended up needing to go to see a consultant to find out what was wrong with me. And we found out they were wrong and I hadn't gone through loss. I was still expecting.
Oh my goodness.
So I'd been grieving that whole Christmas, New Year, grieving the baby we'd lost, and I was still pregnant. And then it was confirmed we were expecting twins. So I went from grieving having lost a baby to coming out to an appointment expecting 2 babies. And that just is crazy to get your head around. I carried on getting sicker and the development of the babies wasn't equal. They told us to prepare that we might lose one of those children, which you can't actually do. There's no such thing as preparation for loss. It's a full body experience when it happens. And I was so sick, they didn't know if I would make it. And so we tragically went on to lose one of the twins, like was predicted. And that whole pregnancy, for a good chunk of it, we didn't know if I would die too. And so I was not only grieving having lost one of the babies, we were also, I remember just keeping on looking at Esme thinking I might not be here to raise you.
Oh my goodness.
And it was horrible. But I had 2 surgeries while pregnant, and that saved my life.
Wow.
And our little one had gone in there, and that was our second daughter we got to bring home from the hospital. So that's how we had 2 little girls we are privileged to raise, and 5 heavenly children who, as I always say, ran on ahead.
Wow. Oh my God. Honestly, my heart is just like pounding because it is such a story, and it is so much that you've been through as a family, as an individual. There is so much that you've gone through. And I'm sure like with each of those experiences, the losses and the births of your beautiful girls that you've got today, there would have been so many different feelings that you've experienced, and probably no 2 losses were the same in any way. And I think that's similar for so many people, in that we all experience loss in a different way. There's no one size fits all way to grieve. But I guess with that in mind, are there some similarities or like common threads or feelings that people would experience going through that?
Absolutely. And this is where my training and expertise really helped me.
Yeah.
I always say that actually loss taught me more than all of my many years of training did, because you just learn so much having lived the experience. However, during navigating those valleys, which they're all-consuming dark valleys, there are definitely similarities and core things that most people will feel, whatever the type of loss. And some of those are going to be magnified in certain situations. So firstly, what really changes the grieving process is your life, your personality, what you've previously been through, what have you journeyed through childhood and your teenage years and other years that you've gone on to live. There's so many things that play a mark in it. If you've already experienced trauma, you're going to grieve differently. And there's many layers. So there's no cookie cutter when it comes to grief in that, because so many other components play a part in it. However, the actual grieving process itself does follow very similar patterns of being all-consuming, extremely dark, where you feel very much devoid of hope. You can't imagine that you'll ever feel joy again. All of those things are super common for most people who are grieving. And there's lots of misconceptions with that as you move on, the grief gets less, the fact that the loss becomes less significant, and all of that's untrue. That's not how grief works at all. What happens is the loss remains the same, the significance remains the same. But how I always teach on this subject is your grief muscles get stronger. So it's like when you're trying to get on a journey of fitness and you're building up certain muscles to help you navigate certain sports well. exactly the same happens when it comes to grief. So you have muscles that become activated when you're grieving, and through that they get stronger and stronger. So as you move through life, you are much better equipped at handling it. You're so much stronger that before, what was completely weighing you down and felt almost incomprehensible that you could continue on with a normal life carrying that weight, you're now so strong. It's like it goes into a backpack on your back, and you're now learning to return to work with that weight on your back. And eventually you get so accustomed to that weight on your back, you don't notice all the time you're wearing it. You'll only become aware of it at certain points that it's on there. And that's the same with loss. So there's a certain amount of truth in some of these cliches that, it gets easier over time. But actually, the truth is it doesn't get easier. You just get better equipped. But you don't stay, if you're processing your grief properly and how we're wired to do, you don't stay in that valley forever. And so if somebody says to me, it feels as black, as dark, as traumatic right now as the day it happened and my life hasn't moved forward, that's a key sign that therapy could help somebody process those feelings where they've got stuck in a really traumatic stage and haven't been able to process, because we are wired to process layers of that. And so now, having gone through those losses and then other losses since then, not baby losses, but losses of precious family members, etc., I can still hand on heart say I'm happier today than I was before losing my babies.
Wow.
Way happier. And I never thought that was possible. And I was trained to know it was possible. But then in experiencing the loss itself, I was like, it's all lies. It's all lies. Everything I've been taught on grief, it's absolutely untrue. There is no way I will feel joy again. There is no way I'll be able to smile again. And now I feel like I lived my life previous in almost black and white. And now I feel I live my life in full colour, that those valleys that were so deep, very traumatic, filled with tears, are now able to hold more joy than before because they've been burrowed so deep. So I still carry the grief, I still carry the loss, but the joy is so profound in those places that were so barren. It's almost a beautiful gift that I feel like my children have given me, which is why I can talk of them and smile and not just talk of them and sob. That I feel that their lives were so short, but they gave me so much. And the legacy that they've left is so huge that some people need to live 100 years on this earth to leave a mark on it. They didn't need to live that long to transform my life, to transform our family's world. And I also grieve with a hope that I know that I'll be reunited one day. So I feel like I've said goodbye for now, but one day we'll be back together again. And that's a very different place to grieve.
It's incredible hearing you speak about your journey, because I just hear it and I'm like, what the human mind, body, I don't know, what we're capable of going through, and sitting here today and being able to process and speak so clearly on. It blows my mind that we're even capable of doing that as human beings. And I think you mentioned it in your story about when you then had your daughter and then you had to then grieve baby loss after that as well. And just that kind of idea that you've got these, like, your beautiful daughter that's sitting there smiling at you with so much expectation and anticipation. Today's a new day. What are we going to do today, mummy? And I think we have that additional pressure as parents that we want to show up for our kids. We want to give them the happiest day ever, every single day. But actually, sometimes inside, our inner world is crumbling and we're like, I can't give you the best day ever right now. And you did touch on the fact that grieving as a parent is a different experience because of the kind of ways that you do have to just get on with the day-to-day life for your child.
Yeah.
What was that kind of like for you? Were there any things that you learned through that process?
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, where my training really helped.
Yeah.
I had studied a lot about child mental health and how children process things as well. And so because of that, I knew there was no shame or risk of damage from her witnessing it. Actually, I knew it would be a gift to her to witness it. I think as parents, as you say, we are wired to want our children to have the greatest day every single day.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not preparing them for life. And when people ask me why there's such a mental health crisis with young people and youth right now, I strongly believe it's because we are taught as parents to shield our children from everything. And actually, what we should be doing is by bravely saying, this is awful right now, but we're all going to survive it, and modeling that and witnessing that and not being afraid to cry in front of them. And that I say with caution, because I don't believe we should use our children as a support system. I don't believe that children will flourish in an environment where our emotions are all over the place all of the time, and that means they often feel like they need to parent the parent rather than the other way around. So I say this with caution and with moderation. The fact that I openly, and Andy too, would share how sad we were with Esme, and we weren't afraid if she walked in the room and she saw us crying, and we'd say, oh, we're grieving at the moment, we're really heartbroken at the moment, but tomorrow's going to feel different. And we were able to model that to her. So she wasn't scared by it. She wasn't frightened. It didn't make her feel out of control. She still felt secure and safe. But we showed her that humans have every emotion, and this is how we healthily process it. So I remember her just being so happy throughout it all. And she'd have moments going, oh, are we all sad now? And we'd all have a good cry. And then she'd go, okay, I'm going to go and colour now. And off she would troop. And we've seen that with other family members actually going through loss. My grandfather died a few years ago, and we were very, very close. And I was in the room with him when he passed away, and Esme and Bronte were with Andy in the other room. And I remember standing in his bedroom, and he'd just passed, and thinking, I don't even know how I can walk into the other room to tell the girls. Bronte had got a really, really close relationship with him. And I remember walking into where they were sitting and saying, Granddad's just died. And Bronte screaming, like this awful scream. And she just fell on the floor screaming and crying. And I remember having to just stand there and then hold her. And everything within me wanted to rescue her, say, it's all going to go. And I knew that wasn't what you should do. I knew I had to just sit with her and go, it hurts terribly. And this agony hurts terribly. And it's okay to admit that. It's okay to scream. It's okay to cry. But to just be present and hold her. And she then said something that, oh my goodness, it was like an arrow through my heart. She went, Mummy, I will never, ever be happy again. And I remember just sobbing with her and thinking, my daughter's joy has all just left her. And thinking, God, you're going to have to lead us through this time of bereavement. And no joke, the next morning, it was a really sunny morning. And she came skipping into the bedroom going, it's the most beautiful day today. What are we going to do? And I'm like, hang on, 24 hours ago, you said you were never going to experience joy again. And it was such a beautiful reminder of how children and young people grieve. It's all consuming. It's the end of the world. But then their brain leads them out of it, and they can experience full on joy and go back to normal life. And then a few hours later, it's back to it's the end of the world again. And it's allowing that roller coaster to go. And as parents, we can often want to rescue our children from that and just say, it's all going to get better, darling. Come on, let's just look at the positive. And all of that actually robs our children from true development. The fact that you want them to be able to be comfortable with sitting with pain and sitting with grief. They don't need to be rescued from it. That there's especially something to do with British culture that isn't comfortable with children witnessing grief. We often don't allow children to go to funerals. The first time many will attend a funeral, it's when they're an adult, and then they're supposed to just know what to do. They're supposed to just know how to grieve and handle loss when they've been told as children this isn't something you're allowed to participate in. And so I'm a big believer in changing this culture and saying, if you want to prepare your child to be an all-round balanced adult, you've got to let them witness certain parts of life. And that means we allow them to show up when death happens and when loss happens, and we let them come to funerals and we show them what a coffin looks like. And what we're gifting to our children is when they are faced with this as an adult, they have an ability to know they'll survive it.
Wow.
And that's really important.
That is, yeah, I've not heard that kind of approach before, but that makes so much sense.
It's such a bizarre thing that it's very British.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right in that so many of us don't know how we haven't experienced how to grieve properly or how to support someone through grief, which I think is why the books that you've written are so important, because they act as kind of a companion to someone who is going through this kind of grief, and almost as a guide, a handbook, someone who understands what they're feeling. And I think it can be a very lonely experience for many people, especially if their family are a bit like, oh, this is too awkward, we don't know what to say, or friends don't know what to say. But actually finding so much comfort in the words of your book to know they're validated, they're heard, and they kind of know what to do. Was the idea to write these books out of a place of you needed that when you went through it, or it was that you actually got to experience that and you thought, you know what, other people deserve to experience this too?
A mix of everything, actually. So we'd already launched the organisation at the point that I was asked to write a book, and people kept sharing my stories within other books. And so I was being told, you have got to write your story, because otherwise people are reading it by third parties, and actually it will never do it justice unless it comes from your mouth. I was being approached by lots of publishers asking me to write, and I am a known quote writer as well. And so because of that, people felt the next thing on from that would obviously be a book of my story. And so I put it off for as long as possible. And then I think it was 2017, my mum actually said, will you just sit down and write the book? And I was like, I have no time to run a book. We run an international organisation. I am raising children at the same time and doing a huge amount of other things. So how on earth am I going to do it? She went, just do it. In a way only a mother can dictate.
Yeah.
And so I'll just clear a bit of my time every day. I couldn't clear a whole day. I had to still do all my normal work, but I kind of created a few hours a day for, I'm trying to think, I think maybe for 2 weeks, and just thought, even if I write just the start of a book in that time, it will give me the confidence to know I'm going to be able to do this. And I actually wrote the whole book in 10 days.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in those hours that I'd set out. So I didn't even need 2 weeks.
And that's your first book, saying
goodbye.
goodbye.
That was my first book. That became a bestseller. And because of that, everything then changed. There was no pressure on me to write. And so my second book was the hard book. Everyone kept saying, oh, everyone can have a successful first book. The sign of a good author is, do you have a successful second book? And I was just like, don't tell me that. That's awful, awful pressure. And I was told I needed an agent then, because I had got nothing initially. So then got a great agent. And then I got a dream publishing deal with one of the biggest publishers in the world. And they commissioned me to write 2 books. And before that next book was out, I'd got another 2-book deal off them. So within a matter of months, I'd got a 4-book contract. And it was really scary then, because I was writing, having already been paid, for one, but also the pressure of following a successful book I wanted it to be even more successful. And that was really difficult. But the premise of every single one of those books was, what did I need? What would have helped me through those darkest of times? What if people don't have the training like I have? What if people don't have a mum as a therapist like I did, who immediately moved into our house with us to help us through it? What if people don't have any of those resources and are just sent home from the hospital with nothing? So that was kind of my groundwork for each of the books. And I also wanted all of them to serve as a really great educational tool for friends and family. So in my subsequent books, there are, not the first one, but in the next ones, there's actually chapters dedicated for friends and family to read that teaches you what not to say, what are the best things to say. If you say this, what will the bereaved person actually interpret that as? So it's just the guide that you want every friend and family member to read, because when you're going through the depth of loss, you kind of struggle to find words to just explain what you're going through. Whether you're trained or not, it feels like you've entered a world that speaks a different language, and everything that you try and say, you feel like it minimizes your experience because you can never quite convey how bad it is. So because of that, you feel like you're robbed of an ability to communicate. And for many bereaved people, they'll stop sharing then, because I can't ever tell you how bad it was.
Yeah.
And I'm so scared of you thinking it was less bad than it was. I'd rather you not hear about it at all. And so I feel my books give people the language to share when they're going through that, where they can't find the words. And so they'll borrow quotes from my books or parts to share to convey what they are going through. But then to give that gift to family members and friends to empower them. And oh my goodness, the amount of messages I get from family members that so moves me, that said I was absolutely paralyzed because I could see the depth of pain they were in and had no way of rescuing them out of it. And so I have hid away. But by reading those parts of those books, I feel empowered. I now can sit with them in that space and know what to say or know when not to say anything at all. And that is just so beautiful for me to hear, because that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to hand a book to my sister who had never gone through loss and say, that's what I'm experiencing. So, because I'm not equipped right now to share what I'm experiencing. And there was no resource like that. And so that's why I wrote. And I feel like it's been an amazing honour to have been given the permission to write the amount of books I have, which meets people in different places. So one of my subsequent books is Pregnancy After Loss, because that was one of the most traumatic things as well, going through loss, was I still want to raise a living child, which means I've got to go back to that potential valley all over again. It changes pregnancy forever. There's the optimism and the hope is gone. You don't ever go for a scan again excited. And I had to have 2 weekly scans. And every 2 weeks is traumatic, to go to that clinic to find out if your baby's alive or not. And then you have total reassurance as soon as they go, your baby's fine, it's all healthy, everything's well. And then you step out of that clinic and go, might not be okay now.
Yeah.
Because your babies have previously died at a point. That's really hard to navigate pregnancy, knowing that every time you go to the bathroom, you're scared of seeing blood, that you'll never forget the terror of it. And so it changes pregnancy. So when I was asked to write a pregnancy after loss guide, I thought it was almost going to be a pregnancy manual, and I'd got all these experts on on pregnancy after loss lined up, obstetricians, etc. And then as soon as I started writing, I was like, that's not what this book should be. Yes, it needs all the expert advice and stories, etc. But this is a kind of a war manual. It's a guide to navigating extreme terror while trying to also bond with this new life that you're terrified at any moment can leave. And it was that was the hardest book to write. If I thought my book 2 was hard to write, it was nothing compared to Pregnancy After Loss, which was book 4. I felt, I just can't even describe what I went through personally, even writing it. I felt like I'd re-entered the terror of pregnancy, and I knew I had to go there, because otherwise any of the advice and support in it would feel really trite and really
like distant almost.
Yeah, I had to allow myself to fully remember the fear and the terror and go into it, and it was really hard to write. But honestly, now on the other side of it, I'm just so glad I let myself go there. When I hear from families who are reading it who say this is my survival tool, I'm like, it was worth all that agony. But while I was writing it, I was like, this book is coming at such a cost. I don't think I should be writing it, because it felt so deeply personal. And just, I would have never agreed to write it if I'd known I was going to have to almost live through it again.
Yeah.
But I'm glad on the other side I did.
Hello everyone, I'm just interrupting this episode very quickly to let you know that bookings for Spring Harvest 2025 are now open, which is very exciting. So you can head over to springharvest.org. You can check out all the accommodation options and you can see which site suits you best. Minehead, Skegness. The dates are 7th to the 11th of April in Skegness, or 14th to the 18th of April in Minehead. So head over to their website, check it all out, see if you want to book on with your family, and hopefully I'll see you there next year. Wow, because I think so much of the personality that you convey is that you're so connected to people, and you love to help people, and you want to understand people and help them with their stories and come alongside them, which I think is probably why your books have been so successful, because that comes so naturally to you. But through the work that you do with the Mariposa Trust, you don't only work directly with individuals that are affected, you also do a lot of work in policy, don't you, and kind of advocacy work to see campaigns and things change in the overall structure of how baby loss is dealt with in the UK predominantly, isn't it?
Well, it's actually, the campaigning is worldwide and global.
Wow, amazing.
The policy work, so how that started was the Mariposa Trust was set up, so 11 years ago now. Most people know it by our primary support division, which is Saying Goodbye. And that was an overnight success. Within a matter of months, we were having over 650,000 hits a month on our website.
Oh, wow.
And we realised we'd launched something that was desperately needed, not just here in the UK, but globally. Today, the website has way in excess of that, obviously. We're 11 years old, but we directly support, through the work of the charity, over 50,000 people a week who are going through this. And through that, we were hearing thousands of stories a day from people who had got really bad traumatic care experiences. And I remember one day saying to Andy, I know we're a support organisation, but we can't just keep supporting people without trying to change the trauma that's being incurred when it's preventable. There's a lot we can't stop. We can't stop a huge amount of baby loss. That 1 in 4 babies will be lost. That's how, as it stands, there's over 30 million globally every single year. There's a lot we can't do about those. But what we can do is change the trauma associated to the loss.
Absolutely.
And I said, we're pulling people out upstream. What if we could stop them falling in the stream?
Yeah.
And so that's when we started a campaigning wing to the organisation. We became stakeholders within the Department of Health, and that's how we started to really work at a grassroots level on changing things. We launched a few campaigns. We launched a campaign to bring in a new certificate of life or loss. And that has now come in, which is amazing. So as it stood, if you lose your baby pre-24 weeks, there's no governmental recognition that they existed at all. It's like they never existed. And we were speaking with the thousands of people a week who were saying, I need official recognition. There's nothing going to be on my family tree that my baby died. And we were hearing so many people who had lost one twin as well. One twin survived, the other twin sadly passed away pre-24 weeks. And so even on their birth certificate, it goes down as singleton child, that the other twin didn't even exist. It just feels so wrong to have grown a baby and then be told they didn't actually exist. It's just bonkers. So we launched that campaign about 7 or 8 years ago. I regularly do TV and media. I'm a regular on BBC Breakfast, and it was on one of those days that I was talking about something to do with the certificate that I wanted to see happen. And Dame Floella Benjamin from the House of Lords saw me on the red sofa and immediately called us and said, can you come into the House of Lords? I want to meet with you. And I did, and we struck up a really deep friendship and respect for each other's work. And she said, I'm going to join with you on this campaign if you'll have me, because I too believe a certificate should be given. She'd gone through loss herself. And so she came on board. And so we had a bill going through the House of Lords, and it was very successful, had all its readings, etc. And then Jeremy Hunt, who was the then Health Secretary, decided to launch the first of its kind national review to look at all pre-24 week baby loss in England. And it was a massive piece of work, but he said he would like certification to be part of that review process. And I remember going, if we had just sat around that table, to be part of that work would be such a privilege. And it was one Saturday afternoon, I got a direct message, this is so bizarre, on Twitter from somebody to say, you're about to get a call up from government. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Within an hour, an email pinged into my inbox, and it said, could you come down and meet with the Department of Health next week? And I was like, yeah, of course. And we actually had a meeting with Jeremy Hunt planned for the day before. And anyway, it's a long story, but to cut it short, I went to that meeting, and I wasn't just asked to be around the table. I was asked whether I would co-chair and author the complete work, which was like, what? I mean, I could have never dreamed that would be a possibility. And so I was told, you'll be seconded, and 1 day a week, would you be able to do it? And I was like, there is absolutely no way I have the time to be seconded 1 day a week. But I knew I just had to say yes. So I was like, absolutely, I'm your woman. I will do this work. And they said it was 6 months and then you'll be done. All lies, Emma. It's all lies. And so I took up the job, and that work was 5.5 years in length. And it was way bigger than they ever believed it would be at the point of the announcement, because it spans everything to do with loss. So from 999, 111, GPs, workplaces, anybody who comes into contact with anybody who would possibly experience a pre-24 week baby loss, we looked at it as part of the review. So that meant I had to shadow staff. I went into operating theatres. I watched surgeries. I spent time in A&E following all the staff and patients. I literally went everywhere 5.5 years.
Wow.
And had consultations with anybody and everybody, parental groups, religious groups. And that culminated with the review. And I think the government were probably thinking they might have 10 recommendations to action. And there was 73. And before it could be laid in Parliament, I was told you need to get the sign-off from every person that could affect. So every person within NHS England who it could affect, you name it. So that was about a 7-month process, me meeting with every head and every official, having to get them to buy in on it, agree on the wording that had been put in. It was lengthy negotiations. And that was laid in Parliament in July last summer. And in my wildest dreams, if I'd been told that 30% of it would be accepted by government, I'd have gone, that is a huge win for every bereaved family, for the millions of people who this affects. And yeah, they did more than that. They accepted all 73.
All 73?
Yeah.
100%?
100%. They accepted it and issued that from number 10 on the day it was laid in Parliament, which I'd already been told was going to happen in the weeks preceding it, but I couldn't say anything. And so even though I was told it, until I saw the statement, I was just like, will they? Mm-hmm. And so I agreed as part of that to stay and assist and help with the implementation process. So the working on it has concluded, but then we have carried on to help NHS England, the Department of Health and Government on the implementation. So far, we have seen some of them come to being. So the certificates of life or loss, they were issued a few weeks ago. And so now everybody who goes through a baby loss pre-24 weeks can apply for this government certificate. And what's so amazing is I said I could never put my name or work on a system that wasn't backdatable. So we wanted it to be optional, so we knew it couldn't be legal, that you had to do it, otherwise parents would be forced to do it. And it was really important for us to put the power into parents' hands. There's so little you can control when you're going through a baby loss. So we wanted to give parents an actual choice. But also, if it was a legal certificate, like the birth certificate, it can't be backdated. It would only help people from this day going forwards. And I said, how can we leave the millions and millions of bereaved families who have been seeking this recognition to say you lost your baby too early? If you'd lost your baby today, you could get a certificate. So I was passionate that it needed to be backdatable. So at the moment, there's a restriction just because they didn't want the system to crash, which it did crash because of the volume of people.
Wow.
But soon it's going to be, the restriction will be lifted and you'll be able to apply however long ago. So hearing from 80-year-old women who say, I never thought my baby would be acknowledged. And I just feel like my whole life is going to be different going forwards, is so beautiful. I just feel like, how could you say to the people who have been grieving the longest that they can't have something? It would just be so inhumane. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that we're giving this to families, and every day I get tagged from all around England from people who say my certificates are in my hand, and I just can't even tell you what it means to me. And all the way through the campaign, so for the 7 or 8 years we've been campaigning for it, people were like, well, you're obviously doing this for you. You will get 5 certificates. And I've always said, I will not. I don't think I'll apply.
Really?
I've always felt like it wasn't something I needed. Okay. And I can't even tell you why. But I just felt, no, this isn't something I'm doing for me. I'm doing it for other people because I know that's what's wanted. And then on the day they came out a few weeks ago, it was a Thursday, and I was doing back media, going from one sofa to another TV show. It was a lot. I think I did 19 in one day. And I was so drained by the end of it. I just finished Sky News. And we got back to the hotel. And Esme said, I'm going to just read you some of the messages that are coming in, because there was thousands from people. And this one lady said she'd just sat at her computer and applied for the certificate. And she just didn't know it was something she really needed. But for the first time in her life, she got to write out, because you don't have to have a name for your baby. A lot of people haven't named them. But if you have, there's an option to fill that in. And her baby had been named. And she said she wrote out her baby's name for the first time on the application. And just the mere act of that changed everything for her in an instant. And I said, I'm going to apply. And Andy went, are you? And we'd actually never talked about it in that way, because I just always said, oh, we won't apply. And so we'd not even had a conversation together. Well, would you want to apply? Or what would it mean to the girls to apply? We just hadn't had that conversation. The whole focus was on other people and the benefit to them. And I said, I want that. I want to see a document with my baby's names on. I'm in a bit of a different position in the fact that my baby's names have been included in my books.
Yeah.
But that's still not a government issued document. And I was like, I want that for our family file. I want that for my girls because they're their siblings. This isn't just something for us. And so it was on the night they came out. I suddenly knew I wanted it. And I haven't applied. People are constantly thinking because I've been the person campaigning for it and helped it come about because of the review, that I would have got a certificate done already for me. And I'm like, no, I am waiting with everybody else until everybody else can get theirs backdated. At the moment, there's just the restriction that you have to have had a loss since 2018. But until everyone can, I don't want to jump the queue. I'm going to wait with everybody else to get it. But it now means so much to me. Yeah. I feel really excited that I'm going to be able to get that really soon.
Wow, Zoe, you're a boss. Like, it's just incredible hearing you speak and the opportunities that come your way, and you just say, do you know what, like, I don't have time for that, but I'm going to do it. And then it seems to just go to so many more levels than you could have ever imagined. And I think it's just your yes attitude and your willingness to just keep diving in the deep end, even though, it's probably going to be difficult and bring up pain for you even, and because this is such a personal thing for you. Yeah. You're not just doing stuff for other people. It is part of your story as well. And I just think to see all of the success that you've had in this and the impact that it's made, it's just incredible. Like, I'm genuinely mind blown. As you're speaking, I've been thinking about this book, and I feel like maybe you've read it. I don't know, maybe you've not. But have you heard of the book Second Mountain?
No.
Okay, because honestly, so I've started reading it recently, and I can't really say, like, I'm not going to give a glowing review because I've not finished it, so it might turn to be awful the second half. But the premise of the book is basically the idea that as we start out in life, perhaps we've got kind of ideals of what life might be, and that's our first mountain. We're kind of climbing this mountain of maybe personal gain and what we can get from the world and what we imagine life to be. But then for many of us, and most people experience at some point in their life some sort of tragedy or something that kind of happens that really changes our view of what we thought life was going to be, and can sometimes lead us into a valley. So we kind of come off this first mountain of what we expect life to be, and then we're in the valley place, and then we embark on our second mountain, because in the valley is when we've had this experience of our motivations change, things fall off us that were on us before that kind of made us think that's what life was all about, and we have a realization of, actually, no, there's a deeper thing here. There's something else I want to do with my life. And you kind of tend to then embark on your second mountain in such a different way, with such a different outlook. You think more about what you can give to the world, what you can do for others, and how your life might be an impact rather than all that we can gain. And I think hearing you speak, I'm like, you're a second mountain woman. You are on your second mountain, and you can just see it and hear it. Yeah. But I know that there will be so many people who are listening to this, and they are in the valley, and they may be feeling like this valley is endless, it is long, it is dark, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get to that second mountain, if that's ever even there for me. So what would you want to encourage someone who is in that valley right now? How would you want to encourage them?
Firstly, I'd say don't focus on getting to the second mountain, because true healing comes from facing the pain in the season. And the world tells us, don't look at the pain, just focus on tomorrow's going to be better. There's always a silver lining to everything, so look at that. And actually that robs you of true healing, because you're jumping to a different place ahead of concluding the trial you're currently in. So I'm glad I didn't know everything we would go on to do or see, because I wouldn't have allowed myself to go to the depth of pain that I did. And I truly believe that's been the secret to me developing the size of grief muscles I've got, because I didn't bypass anything. I didn't take a shortcut. I literally sat in the absolute agony and truly believed that it would be like that forever, which it wasn't. And for many people, it's not. For some, it is. But I think being given permission to sit in that place and not be swept to a brighter day is actually really healing in itself. Because if everyone tells you, come on, it's time to move on, it's time to, you are just robbing people, not only for permission to grieve fully, you're robbing them of permission to share what they're truly experiencing, because they feel they're being judged or monitored in some way. Or there's something really British about going, you're doing great. You have been so amazing today. And we commend people for being able to put a smile on their face, where actually, why don't we go, you're doing great because you look like crap and you haven't stopped crying, which says to me you are healthily going through this. We just don't. We are just like, if you show up with your makeup on and looking great, then you're a success.
Yeah.
Because you're faking it till you make it, or you have been given this period of time. In Britain, we always go on a guide that general population will give you up to 6 months until they expect you to move on. If you're lucky and have certain people around you, they may give you 12 months, but that is it. After 12 months, they expect you to have your life back together, be showing up like you used to, being able to entertain like you used to, go out socially like you used to. And actually, many bereaved people, what they then do is they're shutting down and they're just showing the world what they want to see. And that's when navigating grief can become even darker, because it becomes a secretive thing. And that's where added trauma comes on, and depression can seep in, and all of these hidden things. While we're giving people full permission, it's okay if you feel utterly crap for the next 10 years. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to journey this with you. And we stop celebrating people who have attended an event and have smiled all the way through. Because there's also a knock-on effect to the bereaved person on that they then feel guilt. Mm-hmm. So if anyone said to me, oh my goodness, you're doing so well, you've just smiled non-stop today, I would go home and I would beat myself up over it. Like, so what they're thinking is, I've navigated this better than they thought. Or they'll say, I would never be like you. I would be at home weeping right now. You're doing so well because look at you, you're here. How that interprets to a bereaved person is, you've gotten over this way too quick. And maybe they didn't mean as much to you as they would to me. It's how the bereaved brain can turn everything. And so what you perceive as a compliment to be sharing with a bereaved individual is being received as something actually negative. And at the same time, you're robbing them of permission to be really real. Mm. And so I always say to any person who wants to support somebody, or to a bereaved person, invite people around and say, show up as you are. That's how you give the gift to a bereaved person. I remember our first ever Christmas, after losing one of our children, and us saying to the family, we're not going to come for Christmas because we just think we're going to ruin all of your Christmas. We're just going to cry. And the family going, come and cry. Let us cry with you. We can all cry into our Christmas dinner. And I felt such permission to show up and not be fake and to just be me. It was such a healing time period, because I didn't have to be anything other than that. But it was also okay if I laughed, and they would laugh, and it was okay if we cried. And we all went on that roller coaster together. So giving people true permission is the ultimate gift to any bereaved person.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Zoe. Honestly, this has been such a brilliant conversation, very insightful. And yeah, I just really have appreciated you being so honest and open with your story and your journey and all that you've done. So yeah, I do hope that if anybody is listening to this and they would like to access your services, that they do that. That's the Mariposa Trust or through Saying Goodbye, or getting one of your books. And yeah, if anyone's listening to this and they want to support someone through grief, or maybe you don't even know anyone that is going through it, but there are so many people in our world that will. So I think it is still important for all of us to understand more about and to be equipped to how we can be better friends and sisters and just supports to people in our community.
Absolutely. So. Anyone who always says to me, I don't know anyone who's gone through loss, I'm like, oh no, you know many. They just haven't shared it with you.
Yeah.
So be that person that people feel that they can share it. And that's just by you giving them permission.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, though. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.